Hey, I want to talk about some ideas on how to fix America. First off, we have to realize that until private citizens provide for the needs of all of our people, all of the American people, whether they deserve it or not, if we empower socialism and socialists. Okay, you can tell people all day long about personal responsibility and that they should just face the consequences of life and lay down and die. But these people will accept a faceless government handout every time. And there will always be socialists out there willing to use the power of the government to take your money and hand it out to the poor in exchange for power. So unless we do our duty and take care of the poor, we empower socialism. Now this can be done in every community by expanding the programs that we already do. I mean, all people can get necessary health care through the ER and through, while that's not ideal, they can also get health care through charitable community medical clinics staffed by volunteers and or supported by public and private grants and donations. And another idea in addition to this is uh, let doctors deduct from their taxes their charitable care. Okay, and you also have to get rid of the alternative minimum tax because, you know, if you're already giving 10% to your church, that pretty much maxes out what you can give before the AMT bites you. So, number three, I mean, just consider what would happen if we cut off a certain segment of our population from getting the basic needs such as food, shelter, and healthcare. They'd turn against us. I mean, they'd rob you, murder you. I mean, really, if you didn't provide life, liberty, um, the basic necessities of life to someone, I mean, they're going to turn violent. So our motivation should be love and concern for our fellow citizens, but, you know, we don't need to give handouts, but hand-ups. We should, you know, we don't want people to stay in poverty, but the truth of the matter is that fascists throughout history have played the poor class against the working class again and again. Hitler, he turned the poor Germans against the working class Jews and scapegoated them for all their problems, and that would happen in America. Okay, the elite class turns the poor class against the working class. So we don't want to empower the socialists. We don't want to empower the fascists. Now, the real problem with healthcare costs is how hospitals are financed. We need financial reform in America. That's the root cause of all of these. And stop putting out, and we need to put out the fires as they arise, but the thing causing all the fires is our financial system. Now, banks and financiers that provide the capital to build hospitals, okay, reap a majority of the profits produced by the hospital. Now, to support this, you need to realize that only 15% of the profit of the bill, your hospital bill, actually goes to the doctor. I mean, doctors are really indentured servants in this system, okay? 15%, only 15 additional percent goes to cover insurance companies' profits. The rest is the facility fee, that other 70%. And 50% of that 70%, and maybe even less than that, goes to pay the nurses, the support services, pharmacy, lab. The other 50% of the 70% goes into the pockets of the mortgage holders or stockholders. Now you may say, well, they deserve, you're anti-free market, you're anti-capitalism. You know, they deserve that money. The stockholders deserve, because they took that risk. Well, it's only an illusion of risk. And that shows that you have no idea how the system works. The U.S. operates on, the whole Western world operates on fractional reserve banking. This allows the Federal Reserve members, okay, only select members can borrow from the lender of last resort, okay? Your local bank cannot borrow from the Federal Reserve, which is why they fail, okay? when they get in trouble. These people that are allowed to borrow from the Federal Reserve, okay, for every dollar that they borrow due to fractional reserve banking and the money multiplier principle, they can lend $10. This is creating money out of thin air. And it's not the federal government creating the money, but private financiers. And if our government were to operate on full reserve banking, then the U.S., and when we get rid of the Fed, then the U.S. Treasury would collect prime interests, assuming like 1.5%, on all the money lent out, and not just a fraction of it. And if we allowed local banks to borrow directly from the U.S. Treasury, okay, that cuts out the middlemen and their profits, okay, because they're going to turn around and charge your local bank even a higher interest rate above prime, but the U.S. Treasury, okay, they're gonna make money on all the money and not just part of it. So the Federal Reserve makes about $45 billion a year. They make that revenue and turn it over to the federal government. Okay, but remember that's only a fraction of what they actually lend. If they made prime on all the money that they lent, and it went directly to local banks, then they would make 10 times, at least assuming a 10-to-1 money multiplier, they would make 10 times that amount. Okay, $450 billion. And that would do a lot to close our deficit. Okay, and you could say, well, and remember, local banks, when they borrow that from the financiers, are already paying that much anyways, and all that profit's just going to the middlemen who created the money out of thin air. So, the other thing that this does is it creates more accountability and responsibility, because there actually is risk, okay, and not just the illusion of risk, because really, local banks don't give you your mortgage. You go through underwriting, and the actual money, the local bank charges you a fee, but the actual money for your mortgage actually comes from the bank behind the bank. Okay? And even if you defaulted on your loan, remember that bank behind the bank only borrowed 10% of the money that they lent you. And in addition to collecting all the interest up front, they're going to repo your house and sell it at like 40 cents on the dollar. So they made 30 cents on the dollar plus all the interest. So that people defaulting on their loans is not why banks failed. Banks failed because of fractional reserve lending, and they were duped into, their fractional reserves, instead of dollars, they were stocks, and they were toxic assets like volatile mortgage-backed security derivatives, which when those became worthless, then the banks couldn't lend because they had no reserves. And then the Fed wouldn't lend to them because they're not a Fed member, and so they were allowed to fail or be bought out. And that's how it works. Now, number 6 is the U.S. needs to exercise the power of the tariff to keep money and jobs in the U.S. I mean, yeah, I'm all for a free market, but the whole idea of a tariff, okay, which is in the Constitution, is not, it's protectionistic by definition, because you want to protect your businesses and your factories against, being flooded by other countries by cheaper goods from other companies. Okay, so the whole idea of a tariff is totally runs against, but that's in our Constitution. Every day we're faced with the choice of whether we're going to spend $10 on a U.S. manufactured good versus $5 on a Chinese product. But think, and you say, hey, man, I'm going to pay the $5. I'm going to save that $5. Okay, but just look at the consequences of that. Because if you send that $5 to China, that's $10 less in our community, which means $10 less for a U.S. job, $10 less for that job, for health insurance for that job, $10 less for retirement, and that means